Hey everyone, it's Sonntag here, aka the quintessential gamer, and I'm going to review Marvel's Avengers. Square did give me a code for the game, so I'm disclosing that. I got a free code for Marvel's Avengers. Christ! Things are exploding everywhere. I guess I got some super deluxe code. Actually, that's a pretty cool outfit. Got to play it basically when Early Access started, so I've been playing since then. I'm at about 25 hours now. Finished the campaign, put some time in multiplayer. Hopefully I'm speaking from a base where I can say something about it. I mean, whatever it is, it's all going to be in progress. That's the point of a games of service game, right? So here we go. To start off with, just right off the top, this game is not finished. It's not done. It's just not. Also, the screen effects is not properly framed. Like, it's not scaled properly to the window. Ugh. The 1.0 is buggy. I was trying to not be too harsh on it, because I don't like saying bad things about games that aren't finished. It's just not polite, you know? But Friday came and went, and that game's still 1.0, and here we are. It's apart from content issues, there's just functionality problems. There's frame rate issues, there's crashes, there's soft locks, there's UI bugs that are pretty obvious. Like, there's a lot of issues this thing got kicked out the door with. Pretty obvious ones. Like, ones where I expect they knew and had to release it anyway because they're probably trying to get out in front of next gen. That's my suspicion. There are things to like about it though, and depending on what level of investment you have in Marvel, or how much you like beat 'em ups or grindy games, this game may be enjoyable for you. Maybe. But there are still problems to know about, so let's get into it. First of all, the campaign is not good, but boy does it start off great. And that's the really confusing thing. The first 5 hours or so are really focused on Kamala Khan. They're very charming, endearing, they have great environment and level design. It's pretty fun to play, and then it just falls off of a cliff about halfway through. A lot of the content changes from being sculpted levels designed to give you a more single-player experience into what are essentially multiplayer levels with AI companions. You get dumped into an open world, you run across it to some objective that's sort of arbitrarily stamped out in the world, and then you transfer into these very generic interior spaces where you accomplish very generic video game objectives, like stand in the circle for a bit, beat this thing up until it explodes. Occasionally you get to fight a boss, but there aren't really that many either. And the boss fights are fun enough. It's more fun than getting picked at by tons of robots. The biggest problem, and I'll get more into this when we talk more about the game's fighting mechanics, is that the mechanics just don't scale up that well. Some of the later levels, it just floods you with robots. That's it. More robots. Robots everywhere. Robots that hit you in the back. Robots that shoot you from across the room. Off screen with no indicator. It just becomes frustrating. So really the campaign is like really high highs and really low lows. High is the first part of it, where it's more cutscene driven and character driven. The lows are when you get into these multiplayer matches that are just boring and repetitive and sort of just copy-pasted. One part of the story even has you just going and doing random missions in the open world to grind up materials. You just have to actually go punch robots to get 25 robot chips. Granted, it comes and goes pretty quickly, but it's just very strange in a game that presents itself as a, you know, narrative-focused, cutscene-driven, action-adventure thing to then transition into go get 25 whirly doos. I feel like it's kind of trying to ease you into the multiplayer experience, which is a little frustrating. That's not why I'm playing a campaign game. It's a tutorial for multiplayer, for sure.
Stay within proximity of the security node.
Let's talk about the story. It's safe. It's very safe. It's generic. It's that same X-Men theme of like, oh, there are people in the world and they have these powers and they're dangerous, so people get scared, and then there's segregation. Yeah. You're meant to care about all these Inhumans, but they don't really introduce you to too many. There's only like one or two that have actual names, and they're not featured all that well. The Avengers themselves have individual storylines too, but these are all very surface level as well, and you've probably heard them told better elsewhere. For instance, Iron Man, even though he makes all of his inventions to help people, now has to understand that sometimes those inventions can hurt people too.
Hey, back off!
Hi, I'm sorry. Who are you?
And then the Hulk is sad that Captain America's dead.
Kamala, your Emeraldite friend here is kind of on my shit list.
Some don't even have storylines. Thor just leaves the story and comes back. And he doesn't do anything. He's just gone, and then he's there. That's it.
I will remember your name.
I can't believe I just met the God of Thunder!
So unfortunately, even though it is like, there is some fun to be had in just that comic book fluff of just like, okay, on a baseline level, this hits certain notes that comic book stories tend to, and that's fun. It just doesn't do anything with it. It just feels toothless. There's no meat anywhere to be found, which is frustrating.
After A-Day. It's impossible to say at this stage.
I actually had a similar reaction to Marvel's Spider-Man. It was kind of this collection of comic book stereotypes and especially Spider-Man story stereotypes, but at least it got them all in there and connected them well enough. This is just sort of piecemeal and light and fluff. It's like cotton candy, you know? It hits your tongue and you're like, ah, and then it's gone. There is, however, a very bright spot in this story, and that's Kamala Khan, which is what makes the beginning of the campaign so great. It's because it's all focused on her.
Guess I really kicked the hornet's nest.
While her writing may not be the most interesting, her VO and performance capture is so good that you can't help but like her. It's great.
You're right. I'll think about it.
Good.
Really, any scene with her in the first 5 to 6 hours was so utterly charming that it told me that I was in for a great ride. And then her significance in the story just sorts of fades. They bring her back at certain points, but those start to get a little... they get a little rough by the end of the campaign because at that point all the characters are just telling her how great she is.
Well, you know, she seems fine to me.
Or she has to continually make these heartfelt statements about what being a hero is so that all the Avengers remember what they're really doing it for.
You can't what? You're ditching me?
Oh, hey, don't take it personally, kid.
It just gets a little rote and it starts to lose its effect. If you consider this a, 5 to 6 hour Kamala Khan game without a good ending, then maybe that's probably the best you can hope for it. I will say, though, that despite my issues with the story and generally finding it totally unfulfilling, a lot of the VO and a lot of the performance capture is really good. It does tons of heavy lifting. So there are certain lines that hit real well. There are certain comedic beats that are just absolutely nailed. And I think that brings a lot of value to the game.
I am Iron Man.
I am Iron Man. So cool.
Okay, now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the combat, the fighting system. So this game is, I guess on the surface, kind of similar to 2018's God of War. It's got a light attack that does hit point damage and a heavy attack that consumes resources but also does stun damage. If you stun an enemy completely, if you fill up their meter, you get to do a cool little takedown animation that restores some of your health and lops off a lot of theirs. This is a system that theoretically works really well. I mean, it worked great in God of War. The problem is, I think they figured out that people were just mashing the light attack all the time. They were just hitting that one button to kill everything. So they put in a mechanic where if you keep hitting the same button or doing the same combo, the enemy will counter you. They will knock you out of your combo and stun you. Neat idea. The problem is, that means you can't choose what combos to use. You have to use them all. And if you have to use them all, then you can't very well concentrate on doing HP damage or stun damage, because you have to mix it up. You gotta use everything. It ceases to be a gameplay mechanic when they introduced another gameplay mechanic to sort of counter it. And to some degree, I see a lot of that in Avengers. Learning what your powers do and using them well does feel good. However, the combat design, the arenas you fight in, the enemies you fight, the way they behave, and the numbers of enemies they throw at you, really throw a wrench in all that. Depending on level scaling and the severity of the attack and a couple of other factors, there are some attacks you can counter, where you shoot out this little burst, it stuns the enemy, great. You have demonstrated mastery of the timing and you've used mechanics, and now you got a stunned enemy, you can really just unleash your big DPS combo on them, right? No, because there's always these floating little drones that'll just pop you, just boop, and then that knocks you out of your combo. And it's just a total, like, flat tire on the fun of feeling like you're good at a beat 'em up.
Forget it.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Now I know what you're thinking, because I'm still thinking it too, is that, okay, that's the point of co-op, right? That's the point of multiplayer. Is that if I'm tussling it against a big spider robot, and there are many spider robots, then Iron Man can be flying around and zapping all the little drones out of the sky, and to some degree that's true. I think the problem is when that cooperation isn't there, or you don't have a team playing as a unit, playing as an individual isn't very fun at all. For the aforementioned reasons of you just get punched in the back or shot with a laser or hit with AoEs that come out really fast. It's just chaotic. And the point of comparison here, I think, is something like Destiny, where, yeah, you can get overwhelmed in Destiny and it feels ridiculous. Like, it just feels impossible. The problem is, in Destiny at least, you can still shoot stuff and it still feels fun. I guess the comparison there is the second-to-second shooting in Destiny feels so much better than the second-to-second punching things in Marvel's Avengers. Bruh. Like, this is kind of the thing of just getting peppered by a million enemies. God, it's so annoying. But surely there's a reason to punch all those robots to death, right? The leveling system. This is games as service now. This is the stuff, well, the numbers are getting bigger and I got an orange thing and I'm gonna put it in the thing over the purple thing, and So there's a lot of issues with the progression system in Avengers, on like a functional level and also like a subjective level. Thematically, just off the top, there's a ton of leveling and progression systems that are there just to be there. They don't really have a justification. To me, this is most exemplified in the factions. There are factions, and each faction has a vendor, and that vendor sells gear, and you can only buy certain gear if you grinded out reputation with that faction, and you do that via like side quests you get generated every day. You know, Destiny, yeah. Here's the thing though, here's the thing though, the gear you can buy from those vendors isn't very good, so why is it even there? Maybe that's something they'll patch. Maybe it's a system they put in and then like, oh, we can use this later. But still, to be presented with that, and that whole system, when it has no purpose, is like, it's annoying. Why is this in the game? It just feels like if it wasn't ready, why is it here? And then the gear system has its own little annoyances. One, none of it's visible, so it's all just stuff that goes into slots and makes a number go up. And that's it. Each piece of gear has individual little perks that are pretty meaningful. You know, damage over time that'll proc on certain effects and stuff like that. So juggling that can be good, and that can work into a game plan or a combo system or a character build if you want to go hard ranged, or if you want to just do melee, or you want to focus on survivability. I can see some utility in focusing on the gear that gives you the perks that enhances that playstyle. Neat. Here's the problem though, the game will shove loads of trash in your pocket all the time, and there's not a good utility to deal with all that. So this is more of a quality of life issue, something that could be easily patched. Certainly drop rates could be tweaked, but still, this is 1.0, so I gotta critique what's there. It's really annoying to consistently have to smash your inventory to bits because it keeps filling up. And then for the biggest question of all, why are we grinding? You know, once you finish the campaign and you can do all these randomly generated levels with arbitrary difficulty values ascribed to them that drop gear that seems incrementally better all the time, why do it? One, I mean, the game might be fun if you have a crew of people to play with, that's enough, but I'm here to tell you there is no content awaiting you. There is a raid coming, Wakanda raid, but I haven't been following it very closely, and I'm not sure I'm going to. The quality of the content that's there now does not give me an indication that it will be that interesting in the future, especially if it hits the quality bar of the content that's there now. Possible the Wakanda raid will be miles better than what's in the game, which is essentially a few huge open areas and then a ton of extremely generic video game interiors. So why should you keep playing after you finish the campaign? I really can't come up with a reason. It's possible that you and your friends just really like the Avengers and you just want to hang out as the Avengers and talk about the Avengers while you beat up some robots. More power to you. But I think for everyone else that doesn't get that charge or need that sort of communal home with their buds, I don't think this game has a lot to offer. That said, and I'll keep coming back to this, there are some good moments in the game. The game looks very good, and I think that does a lot of heavy lifting to make the non-cinematic cast really fit. It actually did matter after a while because these characters actually look really good in the game's engine and in the game's cutscenes. So high marks for that. When it's running well, it runs very well. I played on PC, frame rates were great, and then they very much were not. So it's so tough. It's just highest highs, lowest lows again. One of those things, and the lows are so low. It's rough, but still, gotta give credit where credit's due. The character models in this game look very good.
Hungry?
And while we're talking about aesthetic, I gotta say, the audio is really good too. All the sound effects and hit effects from all the various Avengers sound really fun. It just makes combat more fun to hear those smacks and bops. Thor's hammer in particular sounds great. Iron Man's unibeam has a really cool lasery sound. And it makes every character sound distinct, even if they, you gotta dig really deep to figure out how they actually play distinctly. So I appreciate the audio. While we're on the audio tick, again, I gotta throw it back to the game's performers. The voicing in this game is great. That kind of falls apart in multiplayer when all you're hearing are these one-off quips and these just terrible puns.
I'm beaming with pride!
They tried. It works way better in campaign, at least for the first half. As far as the music is concerned, it's there. It seems to want to mimic the sort of big orchestral sound, the sweeping strings and big heroic horns of the Avengers cinematic score. In doing so, it kind of fails to develop its own personality and is just kind of there to accentuate your generic superhero storyline. There's nothing that really popped out, but then again, nothing that was glaringly bad either. So kind of middle of the road on the music.
On it.
This is one of the things that confuses me the most about this game, is that the brand is just not used that much. Sometimes confusingly so. they just don't use that many characters, despite having a deep roster that a lot of people probably have tons of emotional investment into. It seems like it would be a slam dunk to just pepper this game with cameos, but there are none. Maybe one, if you're generous, but that's it. There are 3 bosses total, 3 villains: MODOK, Abomination, and Taskmaster. That's all. That's it. What makes it extra confusing is there's basically a villain-shaped hole in the game for exactly that kind of character.
What happens when you hurt someone that you love?
There's this coalition of anti-inhuman elite operatives that all have names and character traits, and when they show up, it's like that character. It's not just generic Soldier 5, it's Skydog. Why isn't Skydog anything from Marvel? It's just a dude in a mask. It's another video game mask guy. The Marvel property's right there. Why aren't you using it? That would have contributed so much to my enjoyment of this game, is not only to see characters that I know about, but also to see all these wild ones that I don't. And in that way, it would also be a discovery tool for the greater universe of Marvel, but it's just not used like that at all. And I don't get it. I don't get it. Ooh, Skydog.
So just murdered one of those guys. Come on, Skydog.
Which is what's extra frustrating, is that in a game where ostensibly the greatest value of it is just seeing your favorite Marvel heroes dancing around and punching things, there are very few Marvel characters to look at, which is what makes some of the monetization hooks in this game feel a little more galling than usual. This is an incomplete game, it's functionally buggy, it doesn't make great use of the Marvel property, it doesn't have a lot of content, it seems to try to invite you into playing the same thing over and over again. Whatever, it's video games, that doesn't necessarily bother me. The game is just functionally not finished, but it does ship with plenty of opportunities for you to give them even more money. Essentially, every character has a battle pass. Battle passes can be progressed in with weekly and daily objectives specific to that character. That's a neat idea. Also, progressing along that battle pass does give you currency, so it's ostensibly fair. But you can buy your way through the battle pass, getting all the skins and emotes right away on day 1 if you really want to. I have to feel like they left that door open in case whales trip into it. Just like you have some dude who really, really, really loves Marvel and can't wait to see all these skins. And the skins do look good. Like I said, the character models look fantastic. So I just feel a little weird about the fact that this is an obviously unfinished game put out there with even the possibility of somebody who really, really likes Marvel just throwing their money into this hole just to see Kamala wearing a specific skin. Not to mention there are other parts of the game that feel just on the mobile side of skeezy. For instance, when they introduce you to the cosmetics vendor who sells emotes, which you can't preview by the way, you just got to take it on faith. They give you 500 credits and then they don't let you leave the screen until you spend that 500 credits on a nameplate. So it's that mobile thing of walking you through buying stuff in the store, kind of eroding those barriers. It's just frustrating to see those techniques applied in a game that ostensibly I paid $60 for, but I didn't. Again, thank you Square Enix for the code. And all those factors sort of combine to just leave you with a really empty feeling after playing it for a while. This is a property that means a lot to a lot of people, but it's used to tell a meaningless story that really falls apart, give you a less than well-crafted single and multiplayer experience, and also leave the door wide open for you to throw more money into it if you really want to. All that added together, it just feels like a game that had to be made, not one that could be made. It doesn't feel like there was a guiding and powerful creative vision behind this. It was more like, hey, we got the Avengers, let's have them punch some stuff. Even the joys it does offer, and it does offer some, I want to be fair, which is essentially being a superhero and punching a bunch of robots, even that is pretty bland as far as video games go. It's really just the veneer of the fact that it's the hero you like, which is fine. If you like that, then you'll like that. But really, hopefully that gives you the information you need to decide whether this game is for you or not. If you're enough of a Marvel fan that just seeing your character on screen blowing stuff up makes you happy, then this game will give you what you want. Now on to probably the most difficult question of all. Is this a good platform on which to build games as service? Essentially, can you think about this game as an investment? I gotta be honest, my mentality doesn't really go there. I typically think, why would I buy a game in case it gets good? I can just wait until it's good and then buy it then, you know? But, you know, some people like to get invested. Some people like to feel like they're on the ground floor. If that's the case, you probably already bought it, but might as well address the topic anyway. I think the core mechanics of the game are salvageable. I think with some quality of life patches and a lot of content, updated content, and deeper use of the Marvel property, this could become something really special. It really could. In terms of timetable, that's hard to say, and it also kind of depends on how dedicated Square Enix is to this as a property. Now, we have in the past seen Square Enix stick by their guns a little bit. Final Fantasy XIV is the big reference there, I think. The 1.0 was a really, really bad time for everybody, myself included. They relaunched it later with 2.0, and it's been great ever since, and has since become the second most played MMO in the world. This is the same publisher. It stands to reason that the same people that were convinced that that game was worth reinventing and then saw the success of that would then see similar potential in Marvel's Avengers. But again, I have to go back to, why would you spend the money now when you can buy it later? There'll be more content in the game, it might be cheaper. And here's the amazing thing is, once they add more content, they tend to make the other content easier to get. So let's say they release this Wakanda raid in 2 weeks, and you buy it now, you'll have to grind tens of hours just to get to it. Whereas if you buy it a year from now, that might just be base game content. You get right to it. So be efficient with your time is what I would say. But again, don't let me talk you out of having a good time if that's what you're having. Ultimately, again, my concluding thought is that a lot of this game feels like obligation. It does seem to have a lot of spirit of celebration and childlike wonder with Kamala Khan. That's kind of the only spirit I really read coming through this game. And I guess that's the worst part of all. This is something that a lot of people invest their souls into, and this game has very little soul in it. As usual, thank you guys for watching. I want to get more into this review thing. I do love talking a lot about games, so I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think.